lesson is a review of 1- and 2-step equations, so basic equations. We're going to quickly review this. You should already be somewhat familiar with solving equations. Okay, so we're going to start off with 1-step equations. They're 1-step because they literally just have one step, such as addition or subtraction. So if we have a problem like this where we have a positive 3 plus x, to get rid of it, we always do the opposite operation. My goal is to get x by itself on all equations, no matter how big or small they are. My goal is to have x equals and then something. That's how I know what x is. So in order to do that, I need to get rid of this 3. And I do that by subtracting 3 from both sides. So in this case, x equals 6. I always have to subtract the same thing from both sides, or add or multiply. What I do on the left side, have to do to the right side of the equal sign. Always make sure you're going actually across this equal sign and you're subtracting on the other side, not the same side. We never want to subtract twice from the same side. Remember that this equal sign acts like a balancing scale. If you're trying to balance two things of the same weight, then it's balanced because it's flat like this. They're the same level. So if you have 3 and an x on one side and 9 pounds or something on the other side, if you take away 3 from this side, it would be uneven. They're no longer equal. So we have to take away 3 pounds from the other side as well, and that keeps it equal. And the same with any operation you do, multiplication or division or anything like that. Make sure you do the same thing on opposite sides of the equal sign. Okay. In addition to adding, we can subtract. We can have x minus 4 equals some number. And to get x by itself, we need to get rid of this 4, and we can do that by adding 4 to both sides. And 10 plus 4 is 14, so x equals 14. And you can always check your work. I won't show the check on every one of these since this is just a review, but in order to check, if you think x is 14, you just replace the x in the original problem with 14, and you check to see, does 14 minus 4 actually equal 10 like it's supposed to? If it does, you did it correctly. Division and multiplication are the other two operations you'll encounter. So if you have something like 2x, that means 2 times x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So in order to get rid of this 2, we divide both sides by 2. These 2's will cancel out, and I'll get x equals 4. And then lastly would be a division problem, such as x divided by 5, and you'll always see division written as a fraction. So in order to undo division, we do the opposite of division, which in this case is multiplication. So we have to multiply both sides by 5. On the left side, these 5's cancel. If you remember when you multiply fractions together, if you think of it as fractions, you can cross cancel that numerator and denominator, and what's left is x. And x equals 3 times 5, 15. Now, one type of problem that sometimes looks like a one-step equation, but is in fact a two-step equation, is something like this, where it's minus x. It's 2 steps because you have to do 2 things. First, we're going to have to get rid of this 3. This 3 is not being subtracted. The x is being subtracted. This is a positive 3, so we have to look at what's in front of the number to determine if it's added, subtracted, or if it's positive or negative. This 3 is positive. To get rid of it, we're going to subtract it. So to get rid of a positive number like that does not have a subtraction sign in front of it, we subtract. We do the opposite. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. So this positive 3 and this minus 3 will be canceled out. This x comes down, but it comes down as a negative x because that minus x will stay with it. Whatever's in front, whatever sign or symbol is in front of a letter or number kind of stays with it, kind of determines its sign. So that minus x will come down as a negative x equals 3. And now we have another step to do. This is where the second step comes in. This negative x, you can think of it as a negative 1 times x. And this is multiplication. You're multiplying a negative 1 times x. So to undo multiplication, we do division. We're going to divide both sides by negative 1. These negative ones cancel out, because a negative divided by a negative will give us a positive x. And here we have a positive 3 divided by a negative 1, giving us a negative 3. So that, even though it does look like a one-step with just subtraction in there, it's actually a two-step. It requires 2 steps in order to solve it. Now, other two-step equations tend to look like this. And what you'll have to do is work with whatever is furthest away from the variable first. When we're solving equations, we're actually working backwards from order of operations. So order of operations says multiply 5 times x first, then subtract 8. We are working backwards because we're trying to solve for x, which is where we started. So we're going to undo this 8 first by adding 8 to both sides. Opposite of subtraction. The 8's cancel. 5x equals 20. And then to undo 5 times x, I divide both sides by 5. And x equals 20 divided by 5, which is 4. And that's kind of your most basic two-step equation. And this could be addition or subtraction right here. This right here could be multiplication or division. You're always just doing the opposite operation. Now, one more type of problem with a division. Let's look at this. Let's add a negative. Okay, so this type of problem, again, we're going to get rid of that negative 4 first. To get rid of a plus negative, because a plus negative 4 really means the same thing as minus 4, to undo that, we add a positive 4. So to get rid of plus a negative 4, we add a positive. Anytime you need to get rid of a negative or subtraction, it's the same thing. You add 4 to both sides. So these will cancel out. I have x over 3. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. And then I have a division step, so I undo it with multiplication. I multiply both sides by 3. And my answer is negative 1 times 3, x equals negative 3. Now there's one other type of two-step equation you might encounter. And that looks like this. It is 2 steps. It has subtraction and division, but they're in a different order. If you were doing order of operations in this case, you'd have to finish the whole numerator, the x minus 8 first, and then divide it by 4. So we're going to work backwards from that. We need to get rid of this 4 first. It's what's furthest away from the variable. So to get rid of something where that's being divided by 4, this whole thing is being divided by 4, and to undo division, we multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4 first. This is one of the scenarios where you deal with the multiplying and dividing first when solving equations. And again, the 4's cancel, if you remember how to cross cancel when you multiply with fractions. And what I'm left with on the left side is x minus 8. And on the right side, 3 times 4 is 12. And then I can solve it. It's a one-step equation with subtraction, so to get rid of this, add 8 to both sides. And x equals 20. And that's the basic types of one- and two-step equations that you'll run across.